In this lesson, we'll continue our review of PSAT Writing Test 2, Section 2. We are still on the third passage, Teaching the World to Swing. This is a passage about Louis Armstrong. So we're on question 27. In addition to incorporating solos into its performances, the band evolved in other ways. So this question says, the writer wants a transition that makes a connection to the main topic of the previous paragraph. Which choice accomplishes that goal? And so let's take a look at the previous paragraph. And if you watched these videos in sequence, in this previous paragraph, this was all about the solo performances, the recorded performances, that also the ones in dance halls, in these ballrooms. So that was the main topic. And so 27 looks good the way it is. It makes a smooth transition. In addition to incorporating the solos into its performance, the band evolved in other ways, and then we list these other ways. If you look at these other choices, thanks to the enthusiastic patrons of New York City dance halls, that is not what the whole previous paragraph was about. It's about solos. In addition to performing music arranged by John Redman, way too specific, right? Despite the reputation of somewhat conservative dance orchestra, no, it was about solos. And so I think if you do these enough, you can almost predict the answer without looking at the choices. So definitely there's no change for 27. Henderson had been working with musician and composer Don Redman to develop arrangements of songs that used a call and response structure. So question 28, you see it right after that we start a new sentence according to jazz historians. And again, I just mentioned predicting choices. As soon as you read this call and response structure, this seems sort of like a technical term, right, with music, and it probably should be defined. And let's look at 28 here. The writer is considering revising the revised underlined portion to add the following. So after structure, for example, featured a melody played by the saxophone section followed by an answer from the trumpet section. This looks good. We definitely would need that because we want to explain what call and response structure means. And so we're going to have 2 yeses and 2 nos. Yes, because it mentions the musical instrument that was associated with Armstrong, or yes, because it clarifies a term used to describe Redman's arrangement. It definitely clarifies, it explains the term call and response. And so as soon as you read that, you should almost be able to predict we need a definition because this is not a commonly known term. According to jazz historians Gary Giddens and Scott DeVoe, Redman acknowledged that he had in fact adjusted and altered the structure of his musical arrangements in part to accommodate Armstrong's distinct style. Another question where you can predict it. Adjusted and altered. This looks redundant, right? Why do we have to say adjusted and altered? I'm going to scroll down and look at the choices for 29. And yes, if you see adjusted and changed, adjusted through, reworking, all of these are repetitive. We don't need to state both. We could just state adjusted, and that would accurately define what we need to say. Adjusted. The structure of the musical arrangements. And I'll read this last sentence before scrolling down. Giddens and DeVoe describe the result as music that began to take on a commanding directness and sharper rhythmic gait. And so this question 30 is a punctuation question. Do we need some punctuation? We have music that, and then we have a quote. And this is kind of a tough question, I think. And typically if there is, let's say, a verb like somebody states, you would need a comma when you're setting off a quote. But if you see the word that, right, that never takes a comma. And so again, they're only testing objective rules in writing. Never takes a comma after that. You just list the quote. And so, right, no M dash or colon. The answer for number 30 is just C. Armstrong left Henderson's band in 1925. His influence, for instance, is discernible in the band's later recordings. So this is a transition question, number 31. He left the band in 1925, so no longer in the band. His influence, for instance, is discernible. Well, first of all, we can never have it for instance. I mean, there has to be an example, and there has to be some reference to the example. We definitely know it's not for instance. And he's no longer in the band, but his effect is still felt in the later recordings. We need contrast here, right? We need however. And so for the answer for number 31 is D. And let's take a look at the last couple for this passage. The collaboration between Armstrong and Henderson had put into motion a significant stylistic shift in jazz music. The polished sound of dancehall music had given way to the prominent solo features and call and response arrangements that would become hallmarks of 1930s swing era music. So we have the last two questions here. So 32, this is an idiomatic one. The music had given away. Given away. And this one you really have to kind of test it out. Would you say given away? This is just a phrase you really have to kind of just think about, but you wouldn't say given away to, it's given way to. That's the idiomatic phrase. And so these are a little tougher. Just have to kind of test them out. And the last one, number 33, given way to the prominent solo features and call and response arrangements, that would become hallmarks of 1930s swing era music. So again, this is going to set off a restrictive clause, right? You never use any comma, any punctuation with a restrictive clause. And if you look at the choices, it really, it should be down to B or D. You have to say, is this restrictive or non-restrictive? Is it essential or non-essential? And so that's, if it's non-essential, you put the which. But this is essential, right? This is not giving extra information. It's describing the call and response arrangements that would become hallmarks, right? This is not something we just eliminate. And so we need a that, and there's no punctuation. So the answer for number 33 is D.